I'm going to start the Kuntres V'ani Tefillah, which is printed in the back of the Sefer Yama Tefillah, which is the first Sefer that my brother Yussie printed many years ago. And in the back he has a Kuntres, it's 15 prakim, where he's masber the Avodas HaTefillah al Piyeh Maral. And he begins Perek Aleph, which is Yisoid Inyan Avodas HaTefillah Shifi Shitas HaMaral, which is the Yisoid of davening according to the Maral. Kasav HaMaral b'Nesivas Olam. The Maral writes in the Sefer Nesivas Olam, Nesiv Avodah Perek Dalet, Mishlimas HaTefillah, the completion of the objective of Tefillah, Ishaloite Tefillah b'Mikra Kara, is so that Tefillah will not be something that's happenstance, coincidental, like a Kara, like just happens to be, not permanent, temporary. Ki Tefillah hi adveikis bo Yisbarach, shadam is dabek b'Tefillah bo Yisbarach, because the Ikar Tefillah is medabek b'Hakadosh Baruch Hu, which is to bind yourself and to connect yourself in a permanent way. V'madveikis hazehi b'Mikra bilvad, and if that form of dveikis is only temporary, ein nechshed dveikis kal, then it's not real dveikis. Ki kol mikra hu lizman, anything that's temporary is fleeting and it won't last. Ve'ein tzmidi, and it's not tamid. Yussie adds, Avaliyah is nechshev ki dava Kadosh Baruch Hu tzarich li dveikis b'ofen tzmidi. Has to be consistent, has to be constant. Avadavar she'ein mikri, k'may dveikis hu tzmidi, l'kach roi she'ad dveikis hazeh shaloi b'mikra klal. Again, this is the Maral talking. And says the Maral, that's why there's an Indian of having a makom kavua. The makom kavua is a big shayla. What's the purpose? So it could be, it's funny. Rav Shachter used to point out that the Gemara says called kaveh makom tfilasay ke'avim be'ezri. The Gemara says you should have makom kavua. So I think the Marsha over there says the reason why you have makom kavua is because it's supposed to humble you. It's supposed to be that if the tefillas are ever niskabel, you always say, oh, this must be a good spot. It's not me. This must be like a holy makom. So he says the people that fight over their makom, he says it's always a funny thing to him, because the whole point of having a makom kavua is you basically saying to Hashem, I may not be worthy, but at least this is a makom that's covered, makom that's kaddish. The whole point is to humble you. So he says Maral, the Indian of makom kavua is to make davening more permanent, to make it that it's not a fleeting thing you do a couple times a day, but it's somehow only a couple times a day, but it's tamid. It's somehow a constant in your life. And he says, it's not, fleeting, just you do it, maybe you don't do it. No. It's set. It's permanent. And even if you davik during those davenings, it's not consistent, it's not real. So Yussie says that what you see from the Maral is the ikar objective of davening is dvekas. The Nefesh HaChaim says similarly in Shar Beis Perek Yud we know that davening is meant to replace karbanas. And the same way the avoid of a carbon is to bring the soul of the animal above to Shemayim. And that's why the ikar kapara was with the throwing of the blood, because the blood symbolizes the soul, it's the life force of the animal. Says Rav Chaim from Lozhener, the ikar avodah of davening is to elevate and to give over your soul to Hashem. Davik. L'dabik nafshel l'mayla. Ki koyach hadiber shel adam nikr nefesh. So we don't spray blood. So what do? We use our words, because the words is an expression of the soul. And if you want the soul to be able to bind itself, physical actions is not an expression of the soul, it's a speech. Right? The ruach is speaking. And he says it's not a coincidence when you talk, a little bit of breath comes out, like your essence, your insides are coming out. That's what separates us from animals. It's not physical activities, it's the soul. And what's the difference between us and animals? Speech. So speech is obviously connected to the neshama. Imkin kol teva hayotzim pi adam hu koyach v'chilik nafshe. It's a chilek and a koyach of your soul. V'imkin ayid dibur tefillah adam medabik nafshe b'Hakadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, by the words of davening, you medabik your soul to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Ube'emes So Yussie said, the truth is, now that you know this, that the ikar inyan of davening is dveikus, is to bind yourself in a permanent way to Hashem, this will answer a very famous question. Lama tzarich l'sbal b'dibur. The question is, why must you say the words at all? It's a famous shayla, right? If you think davening you're not yaitza, the question is why? You're talking to God. He reads thoughts. So why is it necessary to speak it out? But according to this, move on. It's understood. The ikar inyan of davening is to bind your soul, and the expression of the soul is speech. For complete davening, to get to that desired result of dveikus, you need to speak. It's a good point. You're going back to Chaim Volozhiner, that he said that the same way that the carbon they would do a zrika sadam to affect atonement, you have to do zrika, and the zrika sadam is the soul of the animals, the life force of the animals, the blood. So when we daven, we use speech. It also makes sense, besides the fact that you can throw blood around, but it also makes sense. Animals don't have more than that. All they have is their physical being. So the physical manifestation of their animalistic soul, whatever it is blood. But we have more than this. The neshama is not just blood. The neshama, the expression of the neshama is a higher form, which is to dibur. Right? They're a chai. The chai, we're medaber. So if you want to express the soul, you wouldn't just throwing blood. That's external compared to the actual neshama. And therefore we have to use our speech in order to create that dveikus between the neshama and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He says, "V'nefesh ha'chaim mevar al pi zeh oidavar." Chaim Volozhiner explains weiter. Chaim Volozhiner adds, "Ki matzinu bekam mekaymis b'mikra b'divrei Chazal, shatfila nikras b'shem nefesh." That we find in Chazal that dibur, the tefillah, is called a soul. The actual davening is described as a soul. It says, "Eshpoich es nafshi l'fnei Hashem." I will pour out my soul to God. Now, if you were writing this in English, you would write, "I would pour out my soul," and add, through prayer. But it never says davening. The word, if you had to find davening in this, the closest is nafshi. So you see that the word nefesh is actually a description of tefillah as nefesh. Ksiv baruching nafshi es Hashem. Hallelujah nafshi es Hashem. Berazal perakam the barachas amr shnaim shenichzil tzvalel because the mechel mispal v'lehim tenes chaver v'yotza tarfin letefilasa b'fanav. Shema toirif nafshay ba'apoy. The Gemara says that if two people are davening, and one person leaves the other person alone in shul, right? So me and you are davening, or two people are davening, and then I leave you alone. The Gemara says the person who left, they take his tefillah and they rip it up, because it's not nice to leave your friend alone in shul. It's creepy, it's scary, and it ruined his kavana. And what's the source that we rip up his davening? Toirif nafshay ba'apoy. They ripped up his soul with anger. Soul is a description of davening. Pirish Rashi, mahi hanefesh zu tefillah. Why is this tefillah described as a soul? But now it makes sense. That's the ikar of davening, is to bedavik nafshi Hashem. The Maral says that as well. Pirish milas tefillah. Noam Elimelech or Melech Hazensk, he says even the word davening, he writes it in Bereshis, Tefillah hu miloshen kesher. Tzamid pasil. Tefillah is from pasil. Pasil is threads. Yeah. So tefillah, it's the same shorish. It's a little bit jumbled, but it's the same shorish as threads, because it's threading, it's connecting, it's binding you to God. Shemedavik atzav b'ayir baruch hu b'dveikus gadol. Hanu kanal shekar v'adis atfili dveikus. Al pisa efshel afar masha metzinu b'tzavas rivosh. The Baal Shem Tov in Tzavas Rivosh, which is the will and testament of the Baal Shem Tov. It's a Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. And it says, Yachshav koydem atfila, that before a person davens, a Jew should think, Shemuchan lamas b'is atfila machmas hakavana, that you are going to have such connection, such dveikis b'Hashem, that you're willing to give up your life for it. Meaning that your soul is going to leave the body. That's what a person should have the mentality. There's some tzaddikim that had such kavanah that al piteva they should have died. It was a chesed from Hashem that they didn't die. That's the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. Malchus Beis, the Baal Shem Tov said in another place, "Zeu chesed gadol Hashem Yisbarach." So I tell you, it's a big chesed. Shadam chai achar tefillah. The fact that you're able to survive Shemona Esrei is a chesed, because your neshama is mamish leaving the body to connect to Hashem. Dveikus, davik. And when the soul is davik by Hashem, it should leave your body, and it's a chesed that it doesn't.
This is certain people.
No, this says the chesed gadol. Every person that it's a chesed gadol. You survive davening. Obviously, it's a bigger chesed by tzaddikim, but it's a chesed. And he says, by the way, Agav, I'll finish the paragraph, I'll tell you something. If you understand that davening is dveikas to Hashem, because that's what dveikas is. So I saw this once, that there's some svarim masber that we find with Nadav and Avihu. The sons of Aaron died by bringing in a foreign fire by the inauguration of the Mishkan. So it's always a big shaila of, were they bad, was it good for them, whatever the pshat was. So I think they're bringing them from the Zohar, that they were really tzaddikim. So if they're big tzaddikim, then what's going on over here? So I think I saw this, that the Baal Shem Tov says that every time a Jew does a mitzvah, really your soul should leave the body. When you're binding yourself to the living God, the neshama doesn't want to go back into the body, and the neshama, he says, but when Hashem gives a command, he obviously doesn't want people to die. So part of having the command to do a mitzvah is like a protection. It's a protection. Nadav and Avihu, when they brought a foreign carbon that was not requested to be done, what they did is they had that dveikus, but they didn't have the protection of giving the neshamas back. So the neshama mamish just left them. So they weren't bad people. On the contrary, they were big tzaddikim, and their avodah was with such fervor that their actually neshamas left them, because they didn't have the protection that comes with the command of every mitzvah. That's what they said. However, l'chayra yesh l'oyer. I have a question. The problem is that the Maral, in a different place, seems to describe davening in a different way. See, right now we've had that davening is dveikus. The problem is the Maral in Nesivos Olam writes, Ki Tefillah hi lahashlam es ha'adam. The objective of Tefillah is to complete the person and to perfect the person. Mashu chaser, that which you're missing, you shall gain. Vaz Hashem yisbarach shemei tefillah sebakashasai. And then once you're complete, Hashem will answer your tefillas. So it's interesting. So it's not dveikus. On the contrary, it's actually, by the way, it's sort of the opposite. Dveikus is, I'm so lacking, I need to complete God. This is, I've become perfect, unless you somehow make it work. It could be it's not a big kasha, but we'll see. Hare, shamaral mevar, she'ikar in atfilu hu lahashlam esadam la'asasi adam hasholim. Obviously, this is being accomplished through davening, as I'll explain later on. Umetaretz al piza kusha yadu, and the Maral uses this Yussie to explain, to answer a famous question. A kolin in tefillah, right? The Maral, it's a very good question, which is, what's the point of davening b'chalal? Not just davening out loud. What's the point of davening at all? Shim roya adam sheitla Hashem zbarach mashum mevakesh lama leitin lebloy tefillah. V'me'ena roya loyim kenafi mispal mevakesh leitin Hashem zbarach kashasei. It's one of the most famous questions of all time. The Maral is bothered by this, which is, what is the point of davening? If I'm supposed to get it, Hashem should give it to me without asking. If I'm not supposed to get it, then asking won't change anything. You're familiar with this very famous question. So it says the Maral, Maral Mataretz, Shebevadam Madrigas Adam Koidin Tfilu Adam Sheina B'Shleimus. Elish Chesar B'Madrigasai. Vein a roy lekam mashum avakish. Avi de avodas atfila harei adam mashlam esatzmai v'zoicha deze lekam mashu chaser. Meaning, Itaka works like this. When I start davening, I'm not worthy of those things because I am a deficient human. Through davening, I perfect myself, and now I'm worthy. So you ask, what's the point of davening? If I deserve it, give it to me without. And if I don't deserve, and if I shouldn't get it, then no. The answer is, by davening, you've perfecting yourself that you're now deserving of it. You may not have been deserving of it 20 minutes ago. See, Yussie is saying, I'm just a little confused in what exactly the Maral tell me is davening. Im tefillah in dvekus, is the purpose of davening dvekus to Hashem, or is it to complete yourself? The truth is, it's very simple, and that it's not a contradiction at all. They're really one. The that through the dveikus you become perfect, or through your perfection you're now worthy of dveikus, however you want to look at it. But they're really going hand in hand. We actually find the Maral in Nidarim actually says this point of fusing these two ideas together. The Maral says, Ki abris hu hatziruf v'achiber sheyesh ben Hashem yisbarach ben ha'adam ve'ein safek ki yadei hashlomas ha'adam hu hachiber v'abris. Through the hashlomas ha'adam hu hachiber, that creates the dveikus. So the dveikus is created through your perfecting yourself, and you're perfecting yourself through davening. So davening is both perfecting you and creating dveikus because it's happening once. Hashem is davik to things that are more complete, and by you completing yourself through davening, you now create that dveikus as well. Lokach yesh bris ben Hashem yisbarach v'adam mitzad Torah she'ashlomas adam mitzad seichel, and that's why Torah also binds you to Hashem, because Torah completes your intellect. And there's a dveikus through Shabbos. That's the whole nefesh yisera, the extra soul. Because also Shabbos, you're elevated, you become a different person through Shabbos. And therefore that creates a dveikus as well. We talked about yesterday, another three. There's another three. You have three different forms of brisim. You could have a bris through Shabbos, which is elevation of the soul. You could have a bris through the bris milah, which is an elevation of the physical body. And then you can have a bris through Torah, which is the intellect of a person. Each one perfects the person and creates a dveikus. By perfecting yourself, you create dveikus. If the purpose of davening is to make a dveikus, and the only form of dveikus comes with hashlomas adam, then by definition it's a transitive property. Then davening also creates a hashlomas adam; it perfects the person. Ki davening hashlomas adam yeshkan dveikus. Uvebir adaver, and the explanation is eich shlemis adam hi gufa geremes dveikus uyisbarach. Now, what we have to figure out is how the shlemis adam biar adaver eich shlemis adam hi gufa geremes dveikus uyisbarach. To understand how the shlemis creates a dveikus. The question is, how am I becoming more of a complete person through davening? How does that happen? See, learning, I get it, because your mind is now thinking more clearly. And the bris milah, I literally remove the foreskin. I get that. And Shabbos, you're getting an additional soul. Like my soul is now doubled. But what hashlama, what shleimus adam, what perfection happens through davening? That's his question. Right? Davening was instituted, at least formatted, by the Anshe Chesed Agdoila, which had amongst them prophets. So you're talking about Mordechai Yehudi. Obviously, doing things that are above our pay grade. Right? The Nefesh HaChaim says that even the great kavanas of the Arizal is just a drop in the ocean of what the Nevi'im were actually thinking about when they instituted those words of davening. Listen, we can't finish it, but we got to do our part. We have to use our little intellect to understand the Seder Tefillah. How is a person perfected in this? Can take the and besides the fact that it's important because it's a chelik in Torah, it's going to enhance our davening when we understand this properly. Okay, so Parak Beis. The name of the parak is Bir HaKesher ben Malchus Beis David u'binyan Beis HaMikdash. So this is the connection between Malchus Beis David and the Beis HaMikdash. That's what this parak is about. So Yussie said to understand what davening is, near lahaktim bebir hakesher shemetzinu ben Beis Hamikdash lakom es Malchus Beis David. To understand this, you have to first understand the connection between the Beis Hamikdash and the Malchus Beis David. That connection. Benusat tefillas Musaf shel Yom Tov. In the tefillah of Musaf of Yom Tov, bizman sheish berachas koyanim, when there is berachas koyanim, anu meisifim, we say the following paragraph, at least Ashkenazim do. V'tiyarev lefanecha asir asenu, right? Hashev shchinoscha l'tzion irecha, to return your shchina to Tzion, v'seder avoda l'Yerushalayim, and to bring the avoda back to Yerushalayim, v'sham na'avod chabira, and there we'll serve you with fear. L'chayra kasha, ma'inin avoda l'ir Yerushalayim. It's an interesting question. Why does it have to say bring the avoda back to Yerushalayim? It's not Yerushalayim; it's the Beis Hamikdash. Where he says she'afsha Beis Hamikdash be Yerushalayim, avin avoda in mekush l'Yerushalayim. It sounds like from the nusach of Tefillah, and this is something Yussie does very often, which is a brilliant thing, which is, you say it all the time, you don't really think about it. It sounds like there's a connection between the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash to Yerushalayim. I would say the connection is the avodah is the Beis Hamikdash, and the Beis Hamikdash happens to be in Yerushalayim. No, that there's an avodah, the connection of the avodah Beis Hamikdash is to Yerushalayim. And what's that pshat? He says, they happen to be in Yerushalayim. There doesn't seem to be an inherent connection between the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim. So why do we say that during davening? It must be that there is some sort of connection, not just that the Yerushalayim happens to be the place that is housing the Beis Hamikdash, but that it is destined to be, the avodah must be in Yerushalayim. That you cannot have a Beis Hamikdash in Tveria. It's impossible. The truth is, we find in Tanakh in many places, that there's something unique about Yerushalayim, that it's not just happens to be the place of the Beis Hamikdash, but that it is destined for that to be in that place. She'ir hazois nivchara lios b'tocha Beis Hamikdash, that it was chosen from the beginning of time that the Beis Hamikdash shall be in Yerushalayim, and you can't have the Beis Hamikdash in any other place. Ve'ina mikra, and it is not coincidental, she'Beis Hamikdash nimtza b'tocha Yerushalayim. Eliyesh kesher atzmi b'nei, but there is an inherent bound between them. Uludugma, the pasuk says in Malachim, "Min hayom asher tzesi es ami es Yisrael miMitzrayim." From the moment I took out Klal Yisrael, lebacharti beir mikol shifti Yisrael live nice bias liyash misham. I did not choose any other city to have my house there, other than Yerushalayim. So you see, it's describing that I chose Yerushalayim to have my house there, connecting Yerushalayim to the Beis Hamikdash. We find the pasuk over in Malachim Yud Aleph Lamed Beis. Ulaman Yerushalayim ha'ir asher b'charti ba mikol shivtei Yisrael, the city that is chosen amongst any other city. Again, it's not a coincidence. It's not that the Beis Hamikdash was chosen and it happens to be in Yerushalayim. There is something inherent about Yerushalayim that it needs to have the Beis Hamikdash in it. Ukehein Rabbis, and there are many psukim like this. Hareish yesh bechira miyuchedes beir Yerushalayim. And you can't have the Beis Hamikdash in any other city. The Rambam himself writes this in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah. The Rambam says, if a Navi were to come and to say, Navi, and he's proven to be a Navi, and he says, if it's temporary, you listen to him, but if it's permanent, not. What's an example? He's looking an example. Giving an example of a temporary break in the mitzvah, because he says, what's an example of when Eliyahu brought a korban outside, not of the Beis Hamikdash, outside of Yerushalayim. He says that he brought it outside Yerushalayim. It should be in Yerushalayim. Meaning, it sounds like, I would say the issue is he brought it outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Right. And he says, no, it's not just that he brought it outside of the Beis Hamikdash. How can he bring it outside of Yerushalayim? It must be in Yerushalayim. Mm-hmm. And he says, Harei shekasav Rambam beperish ir Yerushalayim ye'ir nevcheres. Again, that's another point that Yussie would. He's very smart. He picks up these things. This also explains another concept on Hosafa Yerushalayim, which is there's such a process that if you wanted to add to the Kedusha of Yerushalayim, or to Kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash, there was a procedure. Are you familiar with this?
No.
If you wanted to make Yerushalayim bigger, halachically, right, you could eat Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim.
Yeah.
So what if they wanted to make Yerushalayim bigger? There was a procedure to actually do that. You could extend the limits of Yerushalayim, not just the city limits for like zoning, but for halachic purposes. There was a way to extend the Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim if you chose to do so. The Ketzad Meisifin Al Ha'ir Yerushalayim. How do we add to the city limits of Yerushalayim? So Oyis and Bezdin Shtei Titus. They bring 2 karbanos, Titus. The Holchen Bezdin Achar Shtei Titus. Then they follow behind the animals. V'oimdim b'kinoiris, and they bring their harps. V'tziltzal kol pina pina, they play music. V'kol even b'Yerushalayim. V'oimer aramimcha Hashem kidlisani, and they say that capital Tehillim by every stone. They walk from stone to stone saying aramimcha Hashem kidlisani. Keep going. Mekardin zahu megamar Shavuos. The Gemara actually, it says in Shavuos. Now, why is it that they say this capital Tehillim? Pick another Tehillim. Says Shir Malas. Why are Mimcha Hashem K'lisani? Bir Atam Lam Amar Mimcha Hashem K'lisani K'shur Sevin Yerushalayim Pirish Rashi. Rashi says, Hu Mizmar Shir Chanukas Habayis LeDavid Lekach Amar Oisei. Because that's the Chanukas Habayis, that's the Tehillim that David HaMelech wrote with the intention of inaugurating the Beis HaMikdash, and that's why it's chosen. So Yerushalayim with the Beis HaMikdash. So you're using the inaugurational Beis HaMikdash Tehillim to extend Yerushalayim. So you see another connection between the Beis HaMikdash and Yerushalayim. Dvar Tzarichin, I understand. Shabishlam, Kishma Sivin al Makam HaMikdash, Movin Lama Yishlam, Mizmer Zu, Hoyelvu, Mizmer Shem, David Achun, Kesavayis Mikdash. If you're extending Beis HaMikdash, I get it. Aval Lama Yishlam, Kishma Sivin Rafa Yerushalayim. The answer is, Aval Bira in Il Charu Apianal. But now you understand. Shahoyel V'ir Yerushalayim Yuchedes, She'ir HaNivcheres Liyamakam Mukdash. The Yerushalayim is bound to the place of the Mikdash. It's not just that it happens to be coincidentally. You can't have, it's an extension of the Kedusha Beis HaMikdash. It's the Kedusha Beis HaMikdash spreading forth. Yesh Kesher Atzmi, Bein HaMikdash Bein Yerushalayim, Meil Muvan, Shemaysifen Al Yerushalayim, Shayach Lemer, Mizmal Chanukas Habayis, Hoyel V'chol Yisaf Al Yerushalayim, Nechshava Hoysaf Al Makom HaMuvchar Liyas Botoch HaMikdash. So what's the pshat though? So what is the connection? Ubabir Inyan Bechirazu v'Yisoid Akesha Sheyesh Bein Yerushalayim Mikdash. What is that connection between the Beis HaMikdash and Yerushalayim? Ner Levar Al Pi Divrei Harambam B'Hilchos Beis HaBechir. So we're saying that Yerushalayim is not just coincidentally a place that happens to be housing the Beis HaMikdash, but rather it's bound to the Kedusha of Beis HaMikdash be'etzem. In what way? So the Rambam says in Hilchos Beis HaBechir, Shapasek Shema Rambam, the Kedusha Makom HaMikdash v'Yerushalayim Kitchel L'Shaita v'Kitchel L'Asid Lava. Masha'ekin Shar Eretz Yisrael Batla Kedushas. The Gabi Mitzvah Tzluis Baris Akapanim. Lachachor Ben Abayis. The Rambam Shita is that the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash still exists, and the Kedusha of Yerushalayim still exists, but not the rest of Eretz Yisrael. Beis HaMikdash and Yerushalayim still have Kedusha, but not the rest of Eretz Yisrael. They don't have the same love of Kedusha they used to have. The Rambam Mevar Tam L'Chalik Bein HaMikdash of Yerushalayim and Shar Eretz Yisrael. And the Rambam explains why is it that we're making a distinction that we're putting on one side Beis HaMikdash of Yerushalayim, which still has the Kedusha, and the rest of Eretz Yisrael. The words of the Rambam. Lefisha Kedushas HaMikdash v'Yerushalayim b'pnei hashchina. The Shchina ain't a betela. Because the Kedusha of the Beis HaMikdash and Yerushalayim, they're one, and they're holy because of the Shchina. The presence of the Shchina, and the presence of the Shchina never, Hashem's presence is uninterrupted. Harehu Oimer, V'ashimoisi is mikdashechem. V'amuchacham af b'sheshemoisa mikdashim heim oimdim. The Gemara says that even when they're desolate, my holiness, my presence is still there. So the kedusha is from the Shechina, and the Shechina hasn't left. That's for the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. Hareisha Kasav Rambam, the Rambam is clearly telling us she is soid kedushas HaMikdash v'kedushas ir Yerushalayim achasi. That the Beis HaMikdash and Yerushalayim are really one. The Beis HaMikdash is just more of a concentrated kedusha Shechina. It's more Shechina, and Yerushalayim is a little more spread out, more watered down, so to speak. And they're both holy because of the presence of Hashem that is resting in that place. They're one maracha. Maracha is one organism, one network. They're one network of kedusha. Shekedusha zu sheba b'ashras hashchina, which stems from the resting place, the presence of Hashem. Kedusha achas beinu Yerushalayim bein al Hamikdash. Rak she'Beis Hamikdash hu darga yoser gavoya b'kedushas hashras hashchina al shar Yerushalayim. The Beis Hamikdash is more of a concentrated kedusha, and it's just spreading out more into Yerushalayim. But they're not different types. They're one category. That begins in Yerushalayim and concentrates in that place called the Beis Hamikdash. If you know the next page, according to this, Shashamavur Lael Sheyesh Bechirim Yuchedes Al Yerushalayim Livnos Betochas Beis Hamikdash. That we said before that there's a special connection to Yerushalayim, that it needs to be the place of the Beis Hamikdash. Hainu Mishum Sheyesoid Kedushas Hamikdash for Kedushas Ir Hari Marach Achas, because they're really one unit. V'hamikdash v'Yerushalayim hareim mechubarim be'etzem. Veinim Devarim Nifradim. They're really connected by their very essence, and they're not separate. Va'isa Kedusha Shala'ir Yerushalayim Ha'ilachas Miskaberes Hamikdash. Umeshum Hachi Dinu She'etzem Ha'ir Tzrichaliris Nefcher Sheyeh Hamikdash Havashem Yisei Kedusha Achas. If you can't have the Beis Hamikdash in any other city, because Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash are really one. And this explains the third bracha of benching. We say, Al habayis hagadol v'hakadosh nikrashim chalav, right? They were davening for the Beis Hamikdash. Habayis hagadol. Harei shanu mispalim abini Beis Hamikdash b'emtza bracha zu. L'chari tzarichin. Halei bracha shlishis hari bracha al bini Yerushalayim. The truth is, this bracha is all about Yerushalayim. Ba'inei barachim of Yerushalayim amen.
Right.
So why are we talking about the Beis Hamikdash in there? The answer is because Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash are one. You can't have Yerushalayim without a Beis Hamikdash. Yerushalayim without a Beis Hamikdash is empty, and the Beis Hamikdash without Yerushalayim is also diminished. So one. V'chem Pirush Rashi ikar bracha Yerushalayim. U'ma'in Beis Hamikdash v'in Yerushalayim. L'fi anal davar muvor heitav, and it makes sense. Shahayil v'kedushas Hamikdash ain't a kedusha nefredes m'Yerushalayim. It's not separate. Arehim kedusha acha shahilechas miskaberes. That there's a kedusha in Yerushalayim that is just growing, and intensifying as you walk to that place called the Beis Hamikdash. Nimtza sheikar shleimus Yerushalayim hirak bin Beis Hamikdash. Shekdush Yerushalayim shtalem is legamri al makam mikdash. And therefore, if the point of this bracha is to davening for Yerushalayim to be rebuilt, you can't have that without a Beis Hamikdash. It's impossible. Mishum hachi yishum misvalim bin Yerushalayim tzarich l'spal gam kan bin Beis Hamikdash. Shirak b'zem shtalem is kedusha Yerushalayim legamri. He writes in the brackets, v'ulai yesh levar al pi ma hadich siv b'tehillim hativa b'tzayncha siyan tivna choymes Yerushalayim. As tachbait zivchet tzedek oil v'kalil as yalu am mizbechecha parim. And we say that when you have a desire to rebuild Yerushalayim, then you'll have mizbechecha parim, you'll have karbanos. Because man Beis Hamikdash Yerushalayim, we say when you have a desire for Yerushalayim, then you'll have karbanos. You can't have Yerushalayim without karbanos. It's not really. That's the point. Yerushalayim is the beginning of that kedusha that is culminates with the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore it's really one. It's a karos karbanos. Pashto sarich lavar she'enach anami. Him devar mefradim. Al shekavanas abaj shekad baruchu yavish mizakenu she'ivin Yerushalayim yivres Beis Hamikdash shebay yikra karbanos. I mean, the simple pshat of reading the pasuk is really like this: you could have Yerushalayim, but practically Yerushalayim will be rebuilt with Mashiach, and he'll also bring karbanos. But according to this, it's much deeper. It's not coincidental. It's one. It's one unit. Aval fi anal yesh lavar she'dovid achasi. It's really one. Binyan Beis Hamikdash v'akrav karbanos hari ba'atzma nechshav bin Yerushalayim. V'hinei ba'isa bracha shabin Yerushalayim, in that same bracha of benching anu masifim gamkein v'al Malchus Beis David Meshichecha. That tells you something deep. And this is something that people don't really notice. This is something Yussie picks up on, which is if the whole point of this bracha is to rebuild Yerushalayim, which you can't do without a Beis Hamikdash. So why are we mentioning Malchus Beis David? He says, I don't understand. Ma kesher bein binyan Yerushalayim la komas Malchus Beis David. It sounds like Yussie's picking up that it sounds like you can't have Yerushalayim without David. That the same way Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash are one unit, so too Malchus Beis David completes it. Harambam Hilchos Brachos mevaris in the Rambam writes in Hilchos Brachos as follows: B'chol mi shloi omer Malchus Beis David bebracha zu lo yatsa yedei chayvasai. If you skip that line of a Malchus Beis David in benching, you're not Yotza. Why? Because the consolation is not complete until David returns. So you see from this, from the Rambam, you can't have Yerushalayim with the Beis Hamikdash if it's missing Malchus Beis David. So Gam Kinakom is Malchus Beis David, which means the second Beis Hamikdash, by the way, so you had a Beis Hamikdash and you had Yerushalayim, but it was missing. And notice the Shechina was not Shar.
The second Beis
Hamikdash, because there was no David. He says, by the way, also B'nai Yerushalayim in Shemona Esrei, what do we say? What, I can't have Yerushalayim without David? The answer is no, you can't. By the way, you even mentioned it. There's a special bracha. So it's not like we have to give a shout out to David. He has his own bracha. So why is he in the Yerushalayim bracha? The answer is because the Kedusha of Yerushalayim is Nishlam, is completed with the Hachazaras of Malchus Beis David. You can't have the Kedushas Yerushalayim without Hachazaras Malchus Beis David. Let's finish up the paragraph. He says, David, now move on. Shebin Yerushalayim shleimusa ein lo b'achzaras Malchus Beis David. V'gam ken yesh levar shemarum es bracha zu af b'ben Beis Hamikdash. In that same bracha, which talks about Yerushalayim, it talks about Malchus Beis David. It says v'sishkain b'soicha kasha dibarta. V'sishkain b'soicha. That's the Beis Hamikdash. And bin Beis Hamikdash. Haresha birchas bin Yerushalayim. So that bracha that is dedicated for rebuilding Yerushalayim mentions David and mentions the Beis Hamikdash because it's all one unit. Kailel's tefillah bin Beis Hamikdash. Gam chazaras Malchus Beis David. V'nim tzlafia now sheshleimus Yerushalayim einel b'binyan Hamikdash. Gam chazaras Malchus Beis David. V'hine im Yerushalayim Beis Hamikdash im kedusha achas u'Malchus Beis David nitzrachas gam kin lashlam Yerushalayim. If Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash is one kedusha of the Hashras HaShechina, that begins with Yerushalayim and grows and culminates with the Beis Hamikdash. And now you're telling me I need Malchus Beis David also to complete it. Al kacha yesh kesher atzmi bein inin Hamikdash u Malchus Beis David. That means that there's a unit. That it's not just that David HaMelech is the rightful king. You can't have a Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim without him. And he says, Matzasi shekin kasav hagriz al HaTorah. The Brisker Rav writes this in his Pirush al HaTorah. He says, Din Inyan Beis Hamikdash u Malchus Beis David keshurim utluyim zebazah. They're bound to each other. Or maybe kama psukim shani roim keshes. And he proceeds to bring psukim that imply this. Umevar al pizem ashalachayr tzarachin al perak mizmar shichanu kasabayis l'David. Shekol ha-perak hu b'inyan atzalos David ha-melech ma'oivav. But tzarachin, ma'in is el-chanukas Beis Hamikdash. It's a good question, which is the pasuk, the paragraph of davening that is called the Chanukas Habayis, that was said to usher in the Beis Hamikdash, is Arimimcha Hashem Ki Dilisani, that we said before. Mizmar Shich Chanukas Habayis David. So let me ask you a question. David HaMelech never built the Beis Hamikdash. So the paragraph is not about building walls and building menorahs. What is it about? It's about saving David HaMelech's life. So why is that chosen to describe the inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash, saving David's life? The answer is because David HaMelech and the Beis Hamikdash are one. Mm-hmm. And the saving of David is its
future generation.
Correct. Yeah. That's the foundation of the Beis Hamikdash. The foundation of the Beis Hamikdash is saving David's life. And he says the Brisker Rav, Agriz Mevar, Api Yaseda now, Shahoilo bin Beis Hamikdash, Akamas Malchus David, Kshurim Tulim Zebazeh, move on, Hativ, Shirak Imatzalos David, HaMelech Ma'oivav, Yeshichoilas live nice as a Beis Hamikdash. Dafka through the saving of David is the foundation of the building of Beis Hamikdash. V'zeh Yishlavaris Hadin, De'eni Yeshiva Ba'azara El Malchus Beis David Bilvad. There's a special halacha that no one's allowed to sit in the Azara. You're not allowed to sit in the Azara except for one person, the king of David. Davidic dynasty. The king of David can sit. The king of the Davidic dynasty is able to sit in the Azara. Why is that? So he says, Shatam lama rak Malchus Beis David yichon l'sheves b'azara ve'im b'zestir l'kavod. Right? Why is it that I can't sit in the Azara? It's a bizayon. You don't sit in the house of the king, but the king could. By the way, not just the king, Malchus Beis David. Right? Malchus Yisrael can't. Malchus Beis David could. Why? Because it's one unit. You can't have a Beis Hamikdash without David. You can't have David without a Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, they get to sit. Because it's not a bizayon. They are one with the Beis Hamikdash. Mm-hmm. It's not a bizayon for you to sit in your own home. Yeah. That's the point. So you have to continue weiter in this. I will stop here.